Firstly, let me send very warm greetings of Moedim L'Simcha and Chag Sameach, Good Yom Tov to all our listeners and participants of these recordings. Here am I in my Sukkot on Erev Shabbos Chol HaMoed, and I'm sending you just a few thoughts which are on my mind at the moment. One of them is regarding the Arba Minim, and the second is regarding Shmini Atzeres and Simchas Torah. Firstly, regarding Arba Minim, I think we're all aware of the ideas, some of the basic ideas that are connected to the Arba Minim, that they symbolize various different ways, different parts of Klal Yisrael. One of the beautiful symbolic meanings I find is the one connected to the four different vital organs of the human being. That we understand these Arba Minim to be chosen in such a way that the Esrog represents the heart, the Lulav represents the spine, the Hadassim are the eyes, and the Arabas are the lips. And in that way, what we're saying is we want to dedicate the words of our lips and the vision of our eyes and the feelings of our heart and all the activities of physical activities which are regulated by our spine and nervous system, that they're all dedicated to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, Kol Atzmoisei Tomano Hashem Yichamocha, that every fiber of our existence should be dedicated towards our praise of HaKadosh Baruch Hu and thanking HaKadosh Baruch Hu for all the Chazdei Hashem that we have experienced. Having said that, there is another very interesting mystical interpretation brought down by Rabbi Yaakov Emden in the name of the Mekubalim, which goes something like this, that actually we find in the Torah, in Bereshis, the idea of the two central trees in Gan Eden, the Eitz Hadas and the Eitz HaChaim. The Eitz Hadas represents the forbidden fruit, which was actually the downfall of Adam and Chava, as we all know. But what's interesting is that the emphasis of the way in which that downfall took place is that Chava found the attractiveness and the desirability of the fruit of the tree to be irresistible. And the pasuk there speaks about Nechmad Lahaskil, uses the word Nechmad Chemda, and the Aramaic translation of the word Chemda is the word Esrog. The word Esrog means a desirable fruit, a fruit which induces in us a feeling of the beauty, the attractiveness of beauty and the desire, and that's what happened with the Eitz Hadas. The forbidden fruit overcame us with its attractability, and it was in some way irresistible. He says that actually the original idea, HaKadosh Baruch Hu put these two trees into the world in such a way that what he should have done first at Adam and Chava was to go to the Eitz HaChaim and absorbed the Ruchnius, the spiritual message of the Eitz HaChaim. That was the primordial Torah in a certain sense. As we use the word Eitz in Tehillim, famously we say Eitz Chaim Hila Machazikim Ba is a reference to the Torah. The Torah is an Eitz HaChaim. So the Eitz HaChaim was the initial in some way, a collection of wisdom and understanding which HaKadosh Baruch Hu gave to Adam and Chava in the very beginning, and that should have become first, instead of which they were distracted by the desirability of the Eitz Hadas. One of the interesting things here is that the Gemara, when it asks the question, what was actually that fruit? What was the fruit on that tree? So in the Christian world, they speak about the apple as being the forbidden fruit, but of course in Chazal there is no view that it was the apple. There are different views, or maybe it was a gefen, maybe it was a chita, very different views. And one of the views is that it was the esrog, because the esrog connects directly to this forbidden fruit of the Eitz Hadas. So here we have an interesting thing. That whereas normally we tend to think of the esrog as being in some way the primary, the most powerful and the most beautiful of all the Arba Minim, in actual fact it represents the most problematic of the Arba Minim. Let's contrast that for a second to the Lulav, which represents, says Rabbi Yaakov Emden, the Eitz HaChaim. In fact, the word Lulav itself has a gematria of 68, which is the gematria of the word Chaim. The Lulav is the Chaim. Lulav represents the Eitz HaChaim, the tree of life, which Adam and Chava should have first benefited from before they even approached the Eitz Hadas. So what we're doing here really is we're reenacting the mistake that was made by Adam and Chava, and we're saying what we want to do is we want to take in our right hand the Lulav, because here's an interesting thing, that the halacha is that the Lulav is held in the right hand, which certainly gives it priority, halachically speaking. Why would Chazal give us the lulav in the right hand, if not to tell us that the essence of the Arba Minim, the message, is the value of the Eitz HaChaim? Secondly, we find that the bracha that we're given to say over the Arba Minim is Al Natilas Lulav. It relates directly to the lulav and not to the other three. So we find clearly that the lulav has a primary status among the Arba Minim, and that's because, says Rabbi Yaakov Emden, of the Eitz HaChaim, and our symbolic act of bringing them all together is to say that what we want to do is we want to in some way be metaken, in some way remedy the mistake made originally by Adam and Chava, and to take our esrog, meaning all our desires and our feelings of attractiveness and what motivates us in life, the heart, and we want to attach that to the lulav. By bringing all four together, we are attaching our heart to the lulav, which represents the emes of the Eitz HaChaim Hila Machazikim Ba, the emes of the original Torah and our Avodas Hashem, and that is, I think, a very interesting, maybe not so well-known interpretation of the Arba Minim that I wanted to share with you. The second point I want to make is regarding the sad fact that Shmini Atzeres is for us, particularly here in Israel, but I think for Yidden worldwide, Shmini Atzeres is the yahrzeit of this terrible massacre of October the 7th, which caused indescribable pain and destruction for not just the victims, but also all their families and whole of Klal Yisrael. One can't even look or read about what happened there without really being paralyzed by sadness. And the question is, which I've been asked a few times, how does one really combine on Shmini Atzeres, Simchas Torah, how does one combine these two emotions? To have both feelings of great simcha, of Zeh Hayom Asor Hashem Nogila V'Nismacho Boi, and the simcha of the Torah itself, Kehem Chayenu V'Erech Yomeinu, and at the same time commemorate this period of great sadness. And the truth is, we're reading Koheles, and Koheles chapter 3 famously tells us that Eis L'chol Davar, there's a time for everything, and the pasuk says, Eis Livkos, Eis Lischot, there's a time to cry and a time to laugh. Eis Safod, Eis Rakod, there's a time to mourn and a time to dance. And the truth is, we usually do try and keep these two separate. But what's happened to us here in the last couple of years is that on Simchas Torah, on Shmini Atzeres, these have coincided. And what do we do with that? How do these two feelings cancel each other out? How do we combine that? Do we have any Mekoros in Chazal about that? So there's one very interesting Mekor in Halacha, in Hilchos Brachos, which speaks about somebody who has a bereavement of a parent, and at the same time, because of the bereavement, comes into a sizable Yerusha, sizable inheritance. And so the Pasuk says, so the Shulchan Aruch says, such a person should say Dayan ha'emes on the bereavement, and at the same time say Hatova ha'meitiv on receiving this inheritance. So you find that it's a very strange thing, that these two brachas don't cancel each other out. In some way, they exist side by side. They can coexist with each other. And where do we find a source for that in Chazal? We find a very interesting Gemara in Baba Basra Daf Samach, at the very, very end, the closing lines of Cheskos Habatim. The Gemara there speaks about Rabbi Akiva v'Chaveirov. So Rabbi Akiva, as we all know, lived in the post-Churban generation after the destruction of the Second Temple. So he lived really in a sort of a post-Holocaust generation. And the Gemara there says, Robu Haprushim, many of Klal Yisrael came to him and they said, we want to live a life from now on, we're going to live a life of asceticism, and we're not going to drink wine anymore ever, or eat meat ever again. We're going to live a life of Avelus. Judaism itself for us is a religion of Avelus from now on. Rabbi Akiva talks to them, we won't go through the whole Gemara there, and he says, no, you're making a big mistake. HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants us to serve Him, Ivdu es Hashem b'simcha. We have to, every moment of our life, every breath that we take, everything that we have should give us the simcha of standing before HaKadosh Baruch Hu and engaging in Avodas Hashem. At the same time, there is the Churban. So he says the Churban requires from us a Zeicha l'Churban. We need to commemorate the destruction, and that's where the Gemara brings down all various different commemorations. Under the chuppah, we commemorate Im Eshkachech Yerushalayim Tishkach Yemini. That's the source of that, is that Gemara there in Baba Basra, putting some ashes on the head of the Chassan, some of the Minhag. There are various different Zeicha l'Churbans that we do, but that's because Rabbi Akiva said, of course we can't forget the disasters. We keep that in our heart, but at the same time, the primary emotion is the emotion of simcha and the emotion of the chuppah itself, and that is the combination that we need to be able to develop, and the depth of feeling, and the depth of understanding, which is required of us on Yom Tov. I wish everybody a Chag Sameach, and Bez Hashem, we should celebrate fully, and connect ourselves to the Kihem Chayenu Varech Yomeinu, the beauty of the Torah, which enriches our life every moment of the day, and at the same time commemorate these disasters, and they're engraved in our heart, and they're never forgotten. And I wish you all a very, very good Yom Tov, and Simchas Haregel L'chein Yirot.